my walk, it's in my talk. Your woman won't be, it's not my fault.
It's time for Hitting Left with Mike Klonsky and friends on Lumpin' Radio.
The Chicago way.
Welcome to the 213th edition of Hitting Left with yours truly, Mike Klonsky, coming at you live today, December 15th on Lumpin' Radio, WLPN 105.5 FM, and streaming across the universe at lumpinradio.com. Our producer this morning is Charlie Garcia. Good morning, Charlie. He gave me the V sign, so I know he's okay over there. The news this morning coming out of Gaza is hellish. Israel pounded the length of the Gaza Strip, killing families in their homes, even as Washington dispatched an envoy to encourage its ally to be more precise in the war against Hamas. I had to, if one's so sick, I would get a chuckle out of that, being more precise, like, they want the bombs to be more discriminate in who they hit. But I'm reading this morning that IDF soldiers went into a school where people were seeking refuge and assassinated people point blank, dozens of people, including children and women. And I can't imagine how much more precise you can be. The point is that this is a genocidal war. And in my take, it doesn't have as much to do with Hamas as it does to keeping the regime of Netanyahu in power, and we got to deal with that. We got to deal with that. And the fact is that when this kind of assassination took place, this mass shooting. It was widely known, and when they called the representative from the State Department on it and asked him, when the press asked him, is this a war crime? His response was, well, it's a tragedy. And they said, yeah, but is it a war crime? And he says, no, it's a tragedy. He says it shows how difficult it is to wage a war like this. So this is the kind of stuff we're getting from our own State Department, which is supplying on our own government, which is supplying the weapons and the money to carry this siege of Gaza on. The other thing I want to report before we get to our guests this morning is our friend Bernie Sanders announced 2 months after the siege of Gaza began, he announced this week that he supported the UN's call for a humanitarian ceasefire. You may recall that for 2 months, Bernie wouldn't say the word ceasefire. he just couldn't get those words out of his mouth, but now he has. He says, I've asked President Biden to do two things. One, not to give $10 billion to Netanyahu's right-wing government and to continue the horrific military strategy, and two, to support a UN humanitarian ceasefire to get in desperately needed aid to the people of Gaza and free the hostages. So good for Bernie. Thank you, Bernie. It's about time. I guess better late than never. And then we got to deal with our friend Joe Biden, who's beginning to scare me because I think this guy is kind of losing his senses, I'm not against old folks like us, and I'm the youngest of this crowd today that we have, except for Charlie. I'm the youngest of our guests today, but there comes a point, where you have to say to yourself, listen, I got to pass the baton on somebody younger. This week, Biden is attracting widespread ridicule on social media for calling Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, Deng Xiaoping, he called him. And he bizarrely claimed that they were chatting in the Himalayas, even though he didn't go to the Himalayas ever with either president. So I'm beginning to wonder, what is what is Joe Biden, what is President Biden seeing that the rest of us aren't seeing? You know, when he looks at the world, and it's starting to scare me. Today, I want to talk about the political situation in the country. We got elections coming up this year. We got to defeat Trump and his fascist gang, and can we do that with Joe Biden as our candidate? That's one thing. But before we get to that, our guests this morning are veteran social justice activists Al Haber and Michael James. You all are familiar with Michael already because he was just on our show a couple of weeks ago. And Michael's got a new book out, great photographs of the group Rising Up Angry, which he, I don't know, did you found it or co-found it, Michael?
I was the co-founder of Rising Up Angry, and the book is full of photographs and text and memories from a lot of people.
All right, we're going to get to that, Michael. But I also have to introduce an old friend, Al Haber. For those who don't know about Al Haber, I call him the George Washington of SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. He was our first, what we used to call the president of SDS. What was that, back in 1961, Al?
1959 and 60.
Oh, 59 and 60.
Yeah, 61, 62. Until 62, I was president.
And one of the co-authors of the Port Huron Statement, which I have to admit, Al, I didn't read the Port Huron Statement. I never heard of it until about 6 months after I was elected National Secretary of SDS. So it shows what the generation gap, at least on my part, was between your generation of SDSers and mine. But we'll get into that. I want to talk to you, Al, about the kind of debate that's going on these days between you veterans of the movement around the war, around Gaza. You know, SDS, we were just talking about this before we went on the air, everybody. SDS organized the first big anti-war march and rally in Washington, D.C. in 1965. Am I right, Al?
Yes.
And you were involved in that.
17.
Tell us a little bit about that, Al. How did that come about, and what were some of the issues around it? I know SDSers were being attacked by some of the Democratic Party liberals for being too militant, or for that by having a protest like this, we would alienate everybody. Is that true?
We got a lot of criticism because the movement was pretty social democratic, anti-communist, anti-Trotskyist, anti-free thinking in a lot of ways, and we were very big umbrella, and everybody was welcome. And so we caught a lot of criticism from the Socialist Party and other people who had been friends and comrades and encouragers. The SDS, we issued our first statement against the war in 1961 when Kennedy said he was sending advisors. We said, war is here, and we made a statement against it. So we were opposition to the war as it developed every stage along the way. But SDS was very multi-issue. So we weren't really taking a lead in it. And then it said, we just got to do something. And so the teach-ins had happened in March. And we determined we would do a demonstration in Washington. And the bombings had started in the north, and people were ready for it. So,
Al, I want to tell you, I was kind of browsing the web last night, and I came across this piece from the Ann Arbor News, dated December 3rd, 1966, about a student sit-in at the University of Michigan. you're an Ann Arbor guy and a University of Michigan guy, and
Yes.
and here's a picture I came across of a clean-shaven Al Haber speaking to a group of students who were sitting in at the time. I'm not sure what the demands were. You can tell us about that. But you follow first. Your father spoke at the sit-in. It says Dean William Haber of the university's literary college stands with his hand on his chin, listening to his son Alan, head of the Radical Education Project, a branch of Students for Democratic Society, which has its national headquarters in Ann Arbor, speaking in opposition to him. So both father and son addressed the sit-in yesterday in the University of Michigan Administration Building. So you were kind of rebutting your dad, and I can relate to that because
This was one of the more dramatic experiences, and I think it led to my, since it's too difficult in Ann Arbor. So the government had said for draft exemption, the top 50% of the grade point average is exempt, and the bottom 50% goes to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the students were really upset about that. We filled Hill Auditorium with a protest rally, and what do we do about it? And we decided we would. Well, the first thing we said was, well, the university should just not keep it. It's a useless figure. Why even calculate grade point average and all that? So just don't provide the data. Don't create the data so you don't have to provide it. So that's a sort of a passive resistance to. Anyhow, we decided we'd have a 1 hour symbolic sit-in at the administration building the next day. And so we filled that building and out into State Street and Maynard Street and up to North Island and South Island. I was there. And my father, in the middle of it, people were saying all sorts. My father, who was dean, and his office was on the second floor. In the middle of this, he comes down and has a very kind of friendly, very gracious. So what are you boys and girls interested in? What's the question going on here?
We used to call it co-opting, right, Al?
It was so patriarchal, and the whole question that also was the in loco parentis and the university guiding our morality and all that. And so there I was, symbolic of the sun that was being acted out, much to the distress. And so then I raised my hand, and then he said, "Oh, I see a hand down there." So he said, "Come up here, boy. What's on your mind?" And so he said, we had a little back and forth, and then he said, "Well, while we have different views on this, you have to respect the integrity of the university." And I said, "That is exactly the problem. When the university turns over the names of the activists to the CIA and the House Committee on Un-American Activities, that's like the Judenreich turning over the names of the Jewish activists to the Nazis." And my father is activist. He was in Jewish communal affairs and on the Council of Presidents of Jewish organizations, and so involved in all that. It was a very challenging thing to say, but absolutely true. The university was double dealing us, and everything they knew they turned over to the CIA. Anyhow, that was a very a hot rally that had a big effect in the community, because everybody saw the university was just really compliant in this war, in spite of my father's good intentions and good words.
And that was one of the big
So
issues.
thank you for bringing that back to.
Well, you look beautiful in this picture, Al. Clean shaven. You look like you're ready to run for Congress or something like that. And that's how SDSers kind of carried themselves in those days, right?
Yeah, when I joined up to become an organizer, I shaved my beard.
Yeah,
I gave it to my mother for a present. She said it's the nicest thing I ever gave her. But we wore a coat and a tie and stuff like that, because and SNCC also had a uniform dress.
right.
Yeah, so we were concerned with the impression that we made.
Go ahead, Mike.
That doesn't last. That
Michael,
didn't last too long, I got to say.
Michael, pick up on that. I see you got a smile on your
I
face.
just, well, we were all in transition. Everyone was starting to grow their hair longer and alter their consciousness, and it was a lot happening. And I don't know. You want to hear when I first learned about SDS?
I would love to, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, I was at Lake Forest College, and I was working on the student paper, the Stenter. And I remember, and there was a thing called the College Press Service, which the National Student Association put out, which they were in sync with the CIA, as I recall. But I remember hearing about a meeting of SNCC people, unemployed coal miners, SDS, and the Northern Student Movement, probably Danny Schechter. They were having a meeting in Hazard, Kentucky. And then I ended up going off to Berkeley in the fall of '64. And I had actually driven fellow students from Lake Forest down to the University of Chicago to drive off to D.C. for that peace march. I couldn't go because I was playing the executioner in The Lark, Ennuy's The Lark. And
who can forget your performance in that play?
Say that again?
I said, who could forget your performance in The Lark? I mean, it was historic.
I just needed a big guy and I was a football player back then, and I was bare chested and I had a black thing over my head.
And it preceded.
I had to stand around and with a thing that I chopped off heads with.
And it preceded.
But I ended up at Berkeley.
No, all right, go ahead.
I ended up at Berkeley, and I remember as I approached the campus my first day, there was a whole group of people surrounding Jack Weinberg in the police car and the start of the free speech movement. I remember some people that I was with, and they were probably like Dave Wellman and maybe Joe Blum, people I had gotten to know, pointing at some guy and saying, "Oh, there's the SDS." And then I was trying to learn how you could use conflict theory to bring people together, to really have a rainbow, all created equal, rainbow coalition kind of thing. And I was trying to figure out how you would do that in my sociology studies. And I found a piece of paper on the ground that said, "Build the interracial movement of the poor." And I said, whoa, this is like a gift from God. And it was an announcement about the Economic Research and Action projects dealing with poverty. And I wrote a letter to SDS and said, I'd like to get involved. And I got a letter back that said, well, you got to do it. So before long, Paul Booth showed up, and we ended up going into West Oakland with a project. It was like, almost all white kids, one African-American in a black kind of lumpen proletariat neighborhood. Didn't last long. But from there, I ended up going to Chicago at Christmas time, visiting SDS office, visiting Joint Community Union, then going to the national meeting we had at Illinois that year. And then eventually I ended up coming back to Uptown to work with Rennie and other people in Join. I had been at a SNCC benefit at the Fillmore, and I talked to Stokely Carmichael, and I said, I'm going to leave, either go work with Hayden in Newark or Rennie in Chicago. He says, work with white people. We got a lot going on in the black community. We need more in the white community.
I remember.
And it wasn't long after that, Klonsky, that I met you at the SDS office in L.A., et cetera, et cetera.
I was just going to say, Michael, I remember you coming through L.A. with a bundle of Movement newspaper. They were called the Movement newspaper.
Yeah.
I think that came out of San Francisco or Oakland. And
it was a farm worker, and it was a SNCC newsletter.
Right.
That Terry Cannon was the editor, and then it turned into an organizer's paper. And it's really wonderful if people can find it. It's archived, but you may have to be some kind of professor to get at it.
Yeah, we didn't know anything about that or about National SDS, but it was only like a year later that the SDS National Office people came out to L.A. and recruited our little band of L.A. radicals. And next thing I know, I'm in Ann Arbor at the convention there, and then a year later in Flint, Al, and ran for national secretary of SDS along with Bernadine Doran and some others, and somehow won that election. Probably I was like the dog who caught the bus.
I was on the National Interim Committee. I had been
remember.
elected in August of '66. So you were my leader, but I was your advisor.
And Al, it seemed like when I got there, your generation of SDS people kind of disappeared. I didn't know where they all went, and I felt like, in a way, we were abandoned out there. What happened? Where did y'all go?
Yeah, but we were a little bit split. We were like younger. We called it the Mississippi, Berkeley, Nebraska axis, or Chicago. It was like kind of a new wave of people coming in.
What we called it for my generation was a prairie power that was displacing the Ann Arbor old timers.
Right, prairie power.
Ann Arbor was seen as sort of with me there, and Tom was there, and Todd Gitlin was there, Paul Potter, and then Carl Oglesby. So the first presidents were there, and by '65 it was clearly, and with the development of the war, clearly time for a change. And SDS was all over the place, and people wanted another. People were up and at them more, and.
Well, I think, Al, that the war, the intensification of the war in Vietnam, and also the shift in the Southern Civil Rights Movement from, kind of being integrationist to the Black Power movement, and the impact that had on the northern cities and ghettos, with the riots or revolts after Dr. King's death and the birth of the Black Panther Party. I think it changed a lot, and it might have been a lot tougher for the older generation to relate to that. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, when I came to Berkeley in '68, the Black Panther Party had just begun, and they had a very close relation with the sort of SDS graduate students in the political science department in particular. And it was that joint effort that produced the first community control of the police resolution that the Black Panther Party put out, and their resistance to the police control of all the communities. So there was a pretty good relation person to person. And their office, when the long haul began, their office was still right next to the new, well, it wasn't called SDS, it was the Union, and the long haul it is now in Berkeley, which is pretty good. That place began in 1971 and 79. And it's still going 40 some years as a activist run center with multi-issue. And it is so important that groups have some meeting place, some place that the cross-pollination and resources and stuff can be gathered together. And that's where, with the way prices go in the cities, it's really hard to get a place that actually becomes for the people.
When did the SDS national office move from Ann Arbor to Chicago?
Actually, I think it was in '65 or '66.
No, I visited in '65 at Christmas time. And it was 63rd and Cottage Grove, I think, right by the track.
It wasn't in Ann Arbor. The national office was always in New York. But when we split from the LID, that's when the office moved to Chicago, and we shipped our archives to Madison. And then in '68, '69, when the Democratic Convention and the Days of Rage were going on, the government was there to close down the office. And maybe you know the story better, but as I heard it, whoever was acting national secretary was looking out the window with a National Guard tank pointing its cannon right at the office, and government people saying, "We want to get it. We're taking over your office." And the guy's talking to his mother and saying, "Oh, it's okay, Mom. Everything is all right. It's a little tense, but don't worry about anything." And then he calls the director of the archive in Madison and says, "Get your butt down here because they're going to take everything unless you can get it out fast." So the little archivist from Madison gets in the state vehicle and drives down to Chicago, arrives at the office that is surrounded by government vehicles, and say, "I'm here representing the sovereign state of Wisconsin, and I'm here to collect some of our material." And he proceeds to unload all the SDS archive and files from the office and take it up to Madison. And that's how come it exists in this society. It's a good story for the archivist, the courage of the archivist.
Well, the story's almost right, Al. I was, it was on in my tour of duty.
Were you the one with the cannon?
Well, actually, they sent fire trucks. They sent fire trucks, and they told us that our office was on fire. This is when we moved to Madison Street, and the fire trucks came up, and they said, "We have to come in the building to put out the fire." And we said, "There's no fire in the building." And we were tipped off about that. It was a raid by the Attorney General Mitchell, not just on our offices, but all over the country. Movement offices were raided. So they started trying to break the door down in our office. The firemen did, with police backing them up. And finally they got through the door, and we had already cleared out the files from the office, like you say, and moved everybody out. There was just 7 of us there, and they came in and beat the whatever out of us and threw us in the back of a paddy wagon and arrested us. And but I could tell you some more stories about that, but they're not fit for community radio. Anyway,
yeah, you warned us about what we could talk about.
Yes, correct. Anyway, we're going to take a little break now. My guests are Al Haber, Michael James, veteran SDSers. And stick with us. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
Telephone rang one evening, my buddy called from...
All right, welcome back to Hitting Left. My guest this morning, Al Haber, veteran SDSer, radical struggler for against war and a fighter for peace. He's a peace warrior. And Michael James, another SDS veteran, SDSer, organizer of Rising Up Angry, author of a new book of photographs that he took. We want to plug that in a little while. Ask Michael where people can get that book. It's fantastic. The photographs are fantastic, and we can't sell here on Hitting Left, but as I said once before when Mike was on our show, to quote Abby and Jerry and the old gang, go out and steal that book. It's kind of hard. It's a big book, Michael. Be kind of tough to steal it under your coat or something like that. So you might have to pay for it. But I'm sure Michael could use a few bucks to keep the thing going. Al,
Michael's a great photographer.
He is.
Whatever you put out is really beautiful.
We appreciate Michael, and I love those black and white photos, Michael. But anyway, we'll get to that. By the way, that was Ry Cooter singing at the break, "No Banker Left Behind," which I think is a really terrific song. Al, let me start with you, but Michael, feel free to jump in there at any moment. Just give me a signal when you want to. Al, we talked earlier about early SDS and its stand on the war in Vietnam, and its willingness to take the heat by organizing militant protests and take a lot of heat from liberals and from the Democrats who were afraid, that we might cost, especially in '68, where we were told that by protesting at the Democratic convention, we would hand the election to Nixon, the Republican, and maybe we did. I don't know, but
We did.
yeah,
We did.
okay. Well, I don't know if we were that influential, but I'm happy to take credit for that. We were fighting a righteous struggle. The Democrats were the war party, no doubt about it, and they were, dropping bombs on Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, napalming villages. Young people certainly had little tolerance for that, and were looking out for their future, and didn't see a future in the war economy or certainly in the draft, where they were being drafted and sent away from their families to go fight, die, or kill for LBJ. So whatever, I don't think we cost the election. I think the Democrats cost the election by being the war party. But that's my take. But I want to hear yours, especially when it comes to today, after October 7th, after the Hamas raid across the border. The response by Israel has been incredible. I think it's appropriate to call it a genocidal response. I mean, bombing civilian cities, displacing 90% of the Palestinian population, denying water, food, and medical aid, bombing hospitals and schools, all that, So in response, here in this country, there's been a growing movement on the campuses, big protests, millions of people around the world demanding a ceasefire, at least, an end to the war. And the response, again, from some sections, not just from the Republicans, but from a section of Democrats, Democratic leadership, saying that all criticism of Israel on this is anti-Semitic, even though a lot of the protests were organized by groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, and a lot of, thousands of Jewish young people were involved. So does this resonate? Does this resonate with you, Al? What's your take on the war and on the people resisting it?
Well, the war party came to power on the 22nd of November 1963 with the assassination of John Kennedy. And at that point, the Pentagon was in control of those who want to maintain a system of deterrence and potential aggression. And the war and the economy are intimately integrated. And that's been the situation ever since, with maybe a half a breath when Carter was there, but not much. And Biden is certainly part of that war mentality, quite independent of Israel. But Israel is a deformation. I would say it's been the Jewish religion has been hijacked by the Zionist political movement, and has, in the state of Israel, which they call the nation state of the Jewish people, has very little relation to the teachings of the Torah, which I pay some attention to. And supremacy is potential in Jewish thought, but it is not necessary. But that is what has come forward, and anyone who ventures to attack Jewish supremacy, Jewish power, is going to be in trouble, to the extent the Jewish community can organize themselves to make sure that Shirley Chisholm never sees the election, or Finley, or anybody who really speaks out. That's what's going on in America, and the American politicians are just going right along with it. That it also serves some American interests in terms of Israel as a bastion of our imperial presence in the Middle East and oil pipeline politics and so on. But this is really a challenge to the conscience of the Jewish people, that they allow this government to murder and kill and pillage and lie and lie and lie. It is the war system and the full spectrum domination, most disgustingly represented in the culture of patriarchy, command, hierarchy, fear, impunity, greed, deceit. Debt ultimately is a culture of violence and killing. And that's how, unfortunately, Israel came to see its strength is in its capacity to wage war, and it has to have a cultural change. And maybe this initiative by Hamas, which has greatly changed the whole situation. One analysis says Hamas did a military calculation. They said, well, the costs are going to be great, but it is worth it. They put Palestine back on the agenda where nobody was talking about Palestine, and all the Arab states were beginning to cozy up in the Abraham Accords with Israel. Well, that is done with now. Palestine, the Palestinian state, is in the center of consciousness in millions of people walking all over the world. Totally amazing victory for the Palestine liberation endeavors, whether it's however it was brought about. And the putting the attention on Palestinian prisoners, which were out of the attention, and for putting the Israeli travesties at the Al-Aqsa Mosque back in the attention.
But Al,
the costs are outrageous, and I would have nothing to do with it. And I think we need a whole nother approach to the situation. And that's what I think is more important rather than the commentary on, who did wrong. We need the nonviolent mediators to begin to intervene and call these war makers to the peace table and take some initiative as the third force in the world politics between the contending war powers. And I'm distressed that there is not enough. What can we actually do to view the peace forces, which are the majority all over the world, to be a real presence in the political scene?
Al, I couldn't agree more with the first part of what you were saying, but I have to take issue with the last part. I mean, I just have a hard time calling the annihilation, calling the genocide of Palestinians a victory, no matter what kind of a protest it breeds. I mean, I think it's great that there's been a response like this, and I think in a way you could say that the siege of Gaza generated a movement, the same way that you might say the election of Trump in 2016. The next day there was 1 million people in the streets, but it seems to me what's going on in Gaza, regardless of how you feel about Zionism or a two-state solution or anything like that, is a travesty, inhuman. And we have to,
yes,
no matter what you think about those other issues, any right-thinking person should be raising their voice and protesting it. And it's not an issue, to me, it's not about Hamas, because this war didn't start on October 7th. This war really started back in, well, you could say in 1948, with the Nakba and then again in 2014, Israel's assault on
all true. It's been going on 75 years. The agreement of the UN in the 29th of November 1947 was ill-taken, did not have unanimity, and the UN was on the verge of revising it by the 15th of May in 48, when the Israelis declared their state on the basis of international resolution that no longer had credibility. And then the war began. The war actually began in November, end of November, when Palestinians who used to be friends of the Israeli kibbutzes said, no, we attack you now. And Palestinians who in the 30s were very welcoming to the Jews Yeah, until they realize they're not here as neighbors, they're here to take us over. And that is a problem that the Jewish community in our country needs to engage with, because they just go along complicit with what the Jewish government is doing. That it's a moral challenge to the Jewish people to allow this travesty to go on. And it should have been when Hamas did their criminal acts, war crimes for sure, what they did, but they considered it a war. So in a war, there are no crime. The Israelis should have treated it as a war crime and called them to the court of justice and so on, and dealt with it like human beings rather than like monsters. And that's what they have become. It's just outrageously terrible. Bomb, 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 bomb. And they want Gaza to disappear back to the Stone Age, the same way Americans talked about Iraq. Back to the bombing, back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And you're all animals. There needs to be a rise of human consciousness, a turning of heart. And that's the last word of the last Jewish prophet. Unless there's a turning of heart across the generations, across these lines of divisions, will come the great destruction. And we're definitely on that path.
Go ahead, Michael. Pick up on that.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to go back to our start of our conversation around SDS. Most of us got into SDS initially around poverty, talking about integration, and also, we were reading Michael Harrington, The Other America, and then the next thing you know, it's like student rights, and then all of a sudden we got this war in Vietnam, and it grew. You remember that when we started out opposing the war in Vietnam, most people in the country were for the war. By the end of the war, there was 70, 80% were opposed to the war. And then a few years later, when we started going into Iraq, then again, 60% of the people were for doing that. So things change. And I think what happened with Hamas, going into Israel, it certainly was abhorrent to a lot of people. And I think, there was a lot of sympathy and concern for Israel. And, kind of we were prepped for that always. But then throughout the course of the last 2 months, Israel has lost any high ground they had. And as much as, we used to talk about, sure, Israel has a right to exist, but there's got to be a two-state solution. Palestinians have a right to a homeland. Being an apartheid state and then going in, people now are learning all about Palestine and the history. And it's changed. I mean, you have a situation where younger Democrats, and I'm sure it's your kids, Mike, my kids, et cetera, grandkids now, pretty sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And, a lot of people don't even know about the Holocaust, and they don't know about the history of Israel and Palestine. That we hear on the air these days, they write off all the demonstrations because they say, from the river to the sea. But it's supposed to be, as you guys were talking earlier, Israel and Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea. And as Klonsky pointed out, what about the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli? Is that imperialist expansion? I think things have shifted dramatically. I think Biden, as much as we can be critical of him for many things, I think he found that he stepped in it big time early on. And I think he's trying to, transform the U.S. position a little bit. And I think the pressure is only going to build. You have in our county, Mike, Cook County, we have the largest concentrations of Palestinians in the country. After that would probably be Detroit. Particularly Detroit is going to be crucial to the Democratic Party and winning the election. And as much as I would like to, like our stance in '68 was up against a war machine party, I was photographed during that convention, trying to tip over a paddy wagon. We were against anyone voting for anybody.
The
But
statute of
looking back
limitations
at
has
it-
run out on that, Mike. Don't worry.
What's that?
I say the statute of limitations has run out on that. Don't worry.
I had to pay a fine and do a little 90-day probation or something. But um, I do think that we really have to acknowledge what we're facing if it's not the Democrats winning. You know, if Biden dropped out, I'd be for Andy Bashir in Kentucky. I'm not sure who we would have, but I'm going to work for Biden and work to try to get the Democrats elected and have majorities in the House and the Senate so that it gives us more room to work at cleaning up the sea going forward. Because if we lose this election, maybe we're going to, as old guys, we're going to hide in caves and be militant. I don't know. It would be very rough. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm critical of the regime of our government. I'm also kind of locked into helping out to prevent what I think would be worse.
This is having the two of you on the show it brings back the same kind of debate that we had back during the Vietnam War. I think it was at that time all the way with LBJ or part of the way with LBJ or none of or vote in the streets. I think those were the contending debates. I just want to say that the problem the Democrats have is that you talk about the upcoming election. I mean, Michigan is a key swing state. Michigan could decide the whole election.
It's key. It's really key.
And you got the 200,000.
I think that the younger people will come around given the choice.
Yeah,
I think that I'm not worried about them voting for Trump. I think that they will turn out for whoever the Democrat is in November.
You may think that, Michael, but
I hope that
there's 200. I
hope it.
There's 200,000 Arabs living in the state of Michigan, and if there's an election, if Michigan is the key to winning for the Democrats, and that Arab population is not going to vote for Biden now. They're going to vote either going to not vote or they're going to vote against Biden. I just read this morning that Trump's poll numbers among black people black voters is in trouble. That the rift between the Democratic Party leadership and the Democratic base is widening. I think 60-something% of Democrats oppose the war in Gaza and oppose what the U.S. is doing there and are calling for a ceasefire. And when you have 60% of your own base, opposed, well, let me put it this way. Biden is in big trouble, and maybe Democrats continuing to prop him up as the candidate is almost handing the election over to the Republicans. I mean, that's one theory, and I kind of think it's true. I think they're going to have to make some radical changes in the party leadership if the Democrats have any chance to win. Go ahead, Al. I know you're leaning in. You look like you want to jump in on this.
Well, I'm not sure that Biden or Trump will actually be there when it comes time.
You might be right.
But I think what we need is to develop what is a independent politics that is not enforcing the war system, and that the U.S. is the mediator of the world. And I think that Trump has a lot of energy because he is critical of the Democratic Party, which is not touching the people very well, and does not have his base. He has a fascist base for sure, but he has a lot of people who are there because there's nowhere else to be, and the Democrats aren't providing the place. And a lot of people are with the Democrats because that's the only thing that's there, but are not there in their heart at all. And if there is most of the people who both don't vote and are there and are voting just because they are with their own lesser evil, would be much happier to look at, well, what is the system change that we need? And I think that's what our energy should be. And ultimately, if there's nothing else that emerges, it will be Biden will best carry that rather than Trump. But I think it could well be that there's going to be a much more significant shift in American politics, because this system of war and domination and $800 billion into the defense industry is starving the people, starving the schools, starving the hospitals, and so on and so forth. And people are angry and could well rise up and say, well, let's just write in our own people. I hold that we should keep a place for independent politics, while also part of the way with LBJ. But and none of the other people. I'm not looking for some other person to be our leader. I'm looking for all our communities to get together and form a platform that really represents a culture of peace and cooperation rather than domination.
I'm afraid that's going to have to be the last word on this topic, Al. Thank you so much. Before we've only got a couple minutes left. Michael, you got a book out about Rising Up Angry?
I do. I just want to say I'm a little more optimistic about what's coming down. And I think that given the labor movement, I think the economy, I don't think it'll be quite as dire. But I could be wrong, and I've been wrong before, but I've also been right.
Okay.
I do have a new book out, and you guys will remember back to 1968 when we were opposed to the war and we were opposed to the Democratic Party, and we went to a farm in Indiana, and the Peace and Freedom Party in California came around and wanted us to run Carl Oglesby for president and or vice president, along with someone from the Black Panther Party, like Eldridge Cleaver. Yeah. We didn't want to do it, but I wanted to do it with Peggy Terry, a Southern white woman from Join in Uptown. And we did that as a way to recruit organizers. And then we met in Fairborn, Ohio afterwards. And that's where we picked the name Rising Up Angry. That's a whole story. And what were we going to do? And we had wanted to take what we had done in Uptown with those ERAP projects, those SDS community organizing projects, and expand that to other places. So what we did was start a newspaper as a way to build an organization. And we called it Rising Up Angry. The song goes, there's a new sun rising up angry in the sky, Max Frost and the Troopers. And we ended up following the lead of the Black Panther Party with Serve the People programs, Breakfast for Children, a Free People's Health Clinic. Anyway, we had a gathering of Rising Up Angry people recently. I put together this new book called Rising Up Angry, Our Fight for a Better World, which includes my photos, other people's photos from our archives, plenty of memories by people in the organization. And it's really quite a neat bit of history. There's a lot of talk about the Rainbow Coalition in Chicago. Clearly, Rising Up Angry was a part of that, but we didn't make it into the original Rainbow Coalition film. But, people are still very much involved in politics here in Chicago, whether it's in government, whether it's been in unions, schools, etc. It goes to show you, if you do some organizing over time, you can create a legacy and a kind of a method for going forward and reaching people. Michael, our hope is that a lot of young folks are going to put together some of the things that the Panthers did, that SDS did, Rising Up Angry, the Young Lords, and incorporate it and move it forward to a higher and better place.
Michael, where can people get your book?
They can get it at the Cultural Center downtown in Chicago at the Buddy Store. They can get it at the main newsstand in Evanston.
What about people who are out of Chicago?
Is to contact me at fatback@aol.com.
All right.
FATBACK@aol.com.
All right. On that note, we're going to close. Listen, I want to thank you, Michael James. Thank Al Haber. It's been a pleasure reuniting with you guys again. I want to do a quick shout out to Australian journalist and truth teller Julian Assange, who's trapped in Belmarsh prison and facing extradition to the U.S. in a couple weeks. I'll have more on that case in the upcoming episodes of Hitting Left. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to my EduPoll blog at Substack.com. Join us again next week right here at Lumpen Radio. And remember, keep hitting left.